Here we are, Cloud Foundry After Dark, Memorial Day weekend edition. It might be a lonely, lonely holiday hangout with me and James.
You know how I am, man. I love our lonely holiday hangouts. That's where we started with CFAD. I was thinking about the first one we did when I was on a road trip to Minnesota, and we were just like, hey, let's just record one of the hangouts we always do.
The same thing we do every night.
That's the authenticity of CFAD, is that we'd be doing this anyway.
More than likely.
It happens to be recorded.
So one of the things that was telling for me this week is it turns out people actually watch this thing, and we almost broke 1,000 in a week on the.
I kind of hate that though, man. I like the whole idea was like 2 or 3 hardcore obsessed people would watch this once a week.
Somehow.
Now we're getting more views than the IBM promotional talking head video that we were watching. We were like, oh wow, that's been up since March. It has 1,000. We had that in 4 days. That had good production value too. It was nice.
I wonder how much money that cost.
Ed.
He's back.
What's up, man? How y'all doing?
Welcome back, man. You're turning into legit CFAD, like a townie. I love it.
A return visitor.
Yeah, good. I think you got a good thing, man. I think it's the right thing for a lot of people.
Thanks. So what should we talk about? So much happened.
I want to talk about Ed's dollhouse. Ed, is that a dollhouse behind you?
It's like a farmhouse.
This is actually the farm over here. Here.
See, I know my toys.
This is my dollhouse.
No, I did not catch you playing with your dolls again, sir.
There's no shame in this one, man.
I'm sitting in my basement where I usually do this, surrounded by boxes that I'm packing to move to Los Angeles. So,
why are you going to LA? I thought y'all are in San Francisco still, right? And here.
I've never been in San Francisco. I live in Pittsburgh right now, and the reason I'm moving to Los Angeles is the same reason I live in Pittsburgh, which is my wife is going to do a fellowship at UCLA.
Oh, nice.
There are worse problems to have.
Arnie,
fair enough.
Arnie, what part of the world are you in right now, man? You have been the IoT globe trotter. I don't even know how many miles you've traveled since I saw you last, man.
I'm home.
Jersey?
I'm home, yeah, Jersey. Jersey, next couple of weeks we're in London, Munich, Wolfsburg, San Francisco, and back home.
You and Josh are in a contest to get the biggest bags under your eyes, I think.
Nah, I think Josh is way more than that. My trips are, not as much as his. But he doesn't go international, not that I know of.
Well, every time he goes home, he's international because he lives in Victoria.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's funny. So, I mean, one thing as we wait for people to show up, the extreme reliance of clients and outsourcing partners is starting to hurt them dramatically, right? I mean, they're locked into these long-term contracts. I won't name names of the client and or the outsourcing vendor, but they are stuck with a ball and chain to those guys. So as the business is looking to adopt the software as eating the world, we want to produce software faster, and we need to innovate, faster than our competition. They don't sometimes realize that they are really completely hampered by the outsourcer. I mean, seriously, the outsourcer, it's not in their interest to move fast. They want to move slow and put as many people. And we run into some interesting challenges as we drive it from the top, like speed, go to market, faster go to market, all that fun stuff. But the outsourcers are just killing these guys. So my bet is the next 3 years, as we see this, the agility and that whole team picking up, I think that the on-ramp to outsourcing that happened quite a bit for the last few years, that will be a lagging indicator. We'll see that happen a lot. So that's been a very interesting trend as you're battling, the big guys in the field, in the market.
I think if we're successful, and by us I mean anyone who's kind of working on making these platforms a reality, and you get to the point where these platforms can handle all the undifferentiated heavy lifting, and the only thing left is the differentiating value.
Yeah.
If you outsource your differentiating value to someone else, then you're always at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and the guys see that, right? So I'm speaking to a line of business CIO, and the guy is like my job sucks. All I do is read contracts and approve bills for like 6 outsourcers who don't do anything for me. That's all he does. And he's like, I can get this faster if I had the right size team under me and with the right platform.
You know what this is, Arnie? This is Meat Cloud. This is the old solution. This is where we came from. Once you had and Schaefer called it this. Actually, about 3 years ago, I took a picture of Schaefer standing next to a big rack of steaks at Alexander Steakhouse in Cupertino.
With Beaker.
Yeah, with Beaker. Chris Hoff in the house. Shout out. Not that networking people watch CFAD. They don't know what apps are.
It's a terrible premonition, but I don't want to spoil the joke to it.
But I have this picture, I'll dig it up, of Andrew texting next to all this meat, and we were talking that night. He's like, man, this is where IT is today. It's total meat cloud, everything. And when you do that, you kind of start to say, well, how do I outsource to get cheaper and cheaper meat? And you lead to this place where you're like, well, we took down unit cost, input cost to this year. I guess I managed that contract right. But what's it really get out? And then you try to step on the accelerator in that kind of construct and really go to differentiate or build new value. And I'm sure it must feel like molasses from some of the conversations you've had, Arnie.
Yeah.
This is a throwback to my some of my other talks about the talent shortage, but managing knowledge work, which is fundamentally what software development is quite different than digging ditches. And so if you're doing the math that people used to do with respect to productivity and people, and you don't recognize the value of intelligence and creativity in this process, then you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, and the sheer fear for clients for a while, where they're afraid to build software. I mean, building software, especially business-defining software. Another client meeting, this is with, I can't even name the name because there's only 2 of those companies, but this is a very big amusement company in the entertainment business, right? And they have a genre-defining opportunity sitting in front of them, truly, right? I mean, they can change the way these guys operate. Their closest competition has already done it. They spent a lot of money doing that, but they've already done it. So these guys have the opportunity now to do it. The CIO is scared to death of doing it right now. I mean, scared to death because of software. They're like, it's a lot of work, but they realize that if they don't do it, their clients are having a terrible experience, and they're going to see a dramatic downshift in consumers using their stuff compared to their competition.
Well, software to me is all about creating experiences, and when you look at what's happening, you have all these entrenched enterprises that their business is defined by something else that's not software.
Yeah.
And so their internal identity is sort of challenged when they start thinking about all the software they need to write, and they tell themselves, "Oh, we're not a software company. We're an X company," and that could be retail or whatever. And then when the switch kind of finally flips, that they're going to be a software company, it opens up all these other possibilities, and they go and they kind of fix some of these other inefficiencies in the system because they recognize that that's what they're going to be. And we saw some of this with some of our clients, and even in the last 6 months, people that I had conversations with internally, where they said, "Oh, we're not a software company. We're not a software company," have really embraced becoming a software company.
Yeah, and again, there's varying levels in this. There's some who don't make that realization. Some of them make the realization but are afraid to do it. Some who make the realization they do want to do it, but their outsourcer is stopping them from doing it. So there's, speaking to all these clients, you get these various interesting problems, and our job is literally to say, hey guys, we'll work this out, right? I mean, they've already made the investments, 90% of the time in Cloud Foundry. someone smart has made the decision to say, yeah, we think the platform is phenomenal. And if they're not made the decision, they'll probably come to CF Summit, and after that, they made a decision. So it's one of those things that has already happened, right? Summit's been pretty phenomenal from that perspective. And I know Waters has been a recipient of at least one email where a client showed up at CF Summit, saw it, came back and said, we want to be a part of the foundation, period, right? It's a big, massive, slow-moving, in theory, company, but they see the tide turning, and they're like, you want to be on the in and not watch it from the outside. You don't want to be a spectator. We want to have a ringside view of the stuff, right? Let us in, and we want to do some amazing stuff with you. So.
Well, the other part of that is these companies that are not, on paper or in their own mindset software companies, many of them are making hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars of investment in IT every year. So
yeah, who doesn't understand that they're a software company?
many,
Is that still a thing?
So many.
Most enterprises do not think they're a software company.
Yeah, I've spoken to a boatload of pharma companies, for example. They're like, hey, the software stuff is nice, but we make chemicals, right?
You have to come at it from their perspective and recognize that they've defined themselves a certain way, sometimes for 80, 100 years, right? We are an insurance company. We are a pharmaceutical company, right? And it's very often the case that a reason that they have existed for so long is that there was this core of innovation to what they were doing. And it just so happened that it was in this space, and then over time they forgot where that came from, and they just sort of kept on out of often very lucrative inertia. But for the most part, people don't recognize not just that they're not that there should be software companies, but that they should be technology companies, right? It's a lot more than just software. And I wanted to add one to your list of reasons why people don't do this, Arnie, because I think that was a good list, and people should realize that there are just hundreds of different variations on why companies don't make these changes. But one of the big ones is that often you'll have smart people, they'll be thinking clearly about this, and then they will come to the realization that to be successful at it, the amount of effort is gargantuan. Right, to make the cultural change that's required in order to turn an insurance company or a pharmaceutical company or whomever else into a technology company, they just fuck it. That's just too much.
Hey Ben, I love me some This Is Fine, but can you turn on your camera?
God damn it, no.
He's gonna look spooky. All you can see is his eyes. So
This is the first time Mark Carlson's hopped on the pure CFAD, because I saw him at Summit, but I don't think he's ever CFADed live. We should welcome him.
Welcome, Mark.
Thanks.
We're gonna do some Cloud Foundry in the Light this week too with Mark.
Hey Mark, are you in Evergreen, Colorado?
I am in Evergreen, Colorado.
You know what I did in Evergreen, Colorado once? I played hockey on a lake up there. You know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah, Lake Evergreen.
Yeah, there's a great lake. They Zamboni it in the winter, and you can play ice hockey right on it. It's amazing.
6 acres of ice, at least between December and March.
But do they have snowflake generators to launch snow into it, or just as
we have so many snowflake generators here? Yes, they were generating this last week, in fact.
Hey Mark, I'm going to be in Colorado on Tuesday and Wednesday. In case you want to have a cup of coffee, I'll be out talking to a couple of big customers. There, some awesome things going down, as you may have heard of.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Unfortunately, I'm going to be with one of your customers in Texas this week. So.
Well, I was keeping you busy.
So since it's your first time, Mark, why don't we talk about what you want to talk about? What's on your mind?
Introduce yourself, Mark.
Wow. So I am Mark Carlson, and I'm the CTO of a consulting company called ECS Team, based in the Denver Tech Center. And we have offices in a couple other places, Atlanta and Minneapolis. And we're doing some Cloud Foundry work with Pivotal, and having a good time getting the team up to speed and helping customers implement and migrate some apps.
Speak about humility. Look at this guy. He walks away saying, doing some Cloud Foundry stuff for you guys. So I'm sitting in this talk with one of his clients, who's one of our mutual clients, at CF Summit, and he's speaking of how Cloud Foundry is being used for ground control systems for satellites. And I'm testing my son, who's, like any 7-year-old kid who loves rockets, and I'm like, did you know that Cloud Foundry is actually being used for rockets right now? And he's like, wow, that's so cool. And I sent him a picture of the slide deck you guys are presenting, and I just became a little bit more popular in the house. So I think you can see you're doing a little bit more than just Cloud Foundry work, I think.
Glad to help out with the dad ops there. That's always good.
It's funny.
Yeah, that's a great customer. That's been my client for a couple of years, and I had the privilege of kind of bringing them to the Cloud Foundry fountain of knowledge, and so they are adopting, and they've got a lot of legacy apps like every other enterprise customer, and a lot of snowflakes, as we were talking about earlier. And so there's a big kind of spreading group that gets it within that company, and so devs that experience what it means to put some apps there are like totally on board, and it's been fun to kind of see some what I call light bulb moments, and sometimes there's strange things like aggregated logs coming off of a bunch of containers, and all of a sudden the lights go on, and then they're hooked, and one of the quotes there, because there's still some rumblings and they haven't committed wholeheartedly yet, but one of the devs caught wind of this and said, if you take Cloud Foundry away from me, I will hurt you. And it's just the devs get it, the ops guys who see it and say, hey, wow, this is a get out of ticket hell, free card. They get it, and so now we're actually working bottom up in that particular organization, which is harder, I think, than when the CIOs get it. But
so Arnie just mentioned you had a talk at Cloud Foundry Summit, but you also were there and taking it all in. What's your takeaway watching the ecosystem and the rest of the stuff we saw on stage last week?
Yeah, this is my second summit, and so last year I paid my own way there and was just there to soak it all in. I've been kind of diving in for probably 3 or 4 months, and then kind of out of the blue, I'd heard about Platform, and I was like, I missed it. And then the summit got announced, and so I really, last year I was in a different role. I was still kind of on my own on an independent basis, and this year we had a booth, we were a sponsor, and I was giving a talk, and so I wasn't able to go and soak it in quite as much. It was a little bit different, but I had a great time talking to customers and talking to meeting a lot of the people I'd met throughout the community, and that's one of the tweets I had in the last week is that we're one of a handful anyway of service providers in the Cloud Foundry space, but our competition has really been helpful, and so we got to experience that firsthand from the unconference and also from meeting the names behind the Twitter handles and things like that. That part was probably more significant this year because I didn't know anybody last year. I just kind of showed up, and this year was a lot more fun for the networking and the community side. So content was great. I didn't go as much of it as I want, so I'm checking out all the videos that are online. And by the way, amazing to have 64 videos online less than 48 hours after the last one was given. That's pretty cool.
Go Linux Foundation. That is some professional conference management Linux Foundation people.
Yeah, and as a sponsor, we had a great experience with working with them, and they took care of us and plugged us in, so it was super.
It'll be a little ironic with all the speak about agility for 2 days, and if you don't do it come back in 2 days. We had no choice, but they did a great job. I was amazed myself.
Yeah, good point.
So I see my buddy Ramiro and Rob have joined us as well. And
hey guys.
You guys work on interesting things, and I think Ramiro, you're just at another conference.
Yeah, I was roaming from summit to summit. So after Cloud Foundry Summit, I ended up at OpenStack Summit up in Vancouver, which was a pretty close distance to us. This is my third OpenStack Summit. I've been involved with OpenStack for about 2.5 years, close to 3 now, since the Folsom timeframe around that. So this is my third live summit, and I got to say it's growing. It's getting more mature for sure. We had about 6,000 people approximately. And I think probably one of the nicest things that we had for first-time presence of the Cloud Foundry Foundation, we actually had a booth from the Cloud Foundry Foundation. as well as our friends from the foundation from Staccato, but they also are based in Vancouver and they had their own presence there separately from the Cloud Foundry booth. But there was a lot of foot traffic, a lot of interesting discussions on the side. Chip Childers was there doing a couple of talks, did a very good job on that. We had some presence from Pivotal. Actually, we were 4 of us, including Josh McKenty, of course, and several of the other guys. So it was actually a good talk. We had quite a bit of meetings on the side, a lot of interest about Cloud Foundry in general. One of those days, I was actually wearing my Pivotal T-shirt, and just people stopped me literally on the halls to ask me questions about Cloud Foundry. It was actually pretty exciting. It was the first time I see that interest, I would say.
Well, there's also outside of Staccato and Pivotal, I mean, HP and IBM and EMC and the rest of these players are involved in both communities pretty heavily.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're all very involved. I would say to a certain degree, this was obviously a very OpenStack-centric conference for obvious reasons.
You would hope so.
I was kind of disappointed still that folks like EMC, for example, well, actually, EMC did a good job. At least they had a panel there, but they had no presence or any expertise in the booth regarding Cloud Foundry, which obviously makes sense. It's a huge company, right? But I was more disappointed with Mirantis, to be honest with you. I mean, I have a lot of friends there, and don't get me wrong on that. But they just joined the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and they didn't mention any single thing about Cloud Foundry in any of the talks that I attended. They may have done others that I didn't attend. But I was kind of disappointed in that perspective, right? I would expect a little bit more mentions, at least.
I mean, sometimes it takes a while to turn the ship, right? And
Yeah.
Mirantis is historically, their narrative is all pure play OpenStack. They just agreed to help us with our product as well, but it doesn't mean everyone in that company
I
is.
forgot to mention that last week. Actually, one of the things that came out at Summit is that Mirantis has actually gone from a year ago saying that they didn't think there was a need for that layer to reselling actively. They have a contract with us, like a multi-year sales contract with us to resell Pivotal Cloud Foundry. And the same week, Dell Services also signed up. And they had gone from being like kind of on the side to actively reselling Pivotal Cloud Foundry now. So we've seen a lot of people saying, look, if we don't have this as part of our commercial solution, we might not have the complete fit for the customer. So that's pretty exciting to see people carrying it in the bag, as we say in the industry.
You talking about George Reese and friends?
No, not the Gradius part. That's a much smaller part of Dell. I'm talking about Dell Services.
Y'all making me laugh like crazy tonight. This is awesome.
Wait, to be specific, that's Dell Digital Business Services. Pretty interesting to you.
Yeah.
The smaller part, but these are the guys who do, again, the words are very loaded, but digital transformation, digital services for clients. Right?
Vehicle can't handle how true my zinger was. He's just dying right over there right now. Give him the heat.
So yeah, I think that having those guys chirp a little bit about CF as I speak of transformation and digital services is.
Yeah, well, and CoreLogic's one of our big early users, and Dell Services is one of their partners. So I think Dell Services, first and foremost, one of the biggest evangelists in Cloud Foundry, Richard Lord, talking about how it's the future. So I think that might have had a lot to do with that. But it's pretty cool to get some more partners built so we can start to meet demand, because Schaefer and Ben will tell you, and Arnie will tell you right now, inside Pivotal, it's almost like hang on tight moment when you look at all the things inbound to us, and that's why people like Mark are so important to us, coming and growing the ecosystem to help actually fulfill the demand we're seeing. I mean, Mark, keep me honest, but that's what it feels like from the inside.
No, that's true. There's a good pipeline of customers for us to go help, and we haven't even, I think, scratched the surface of the applications that need to get migrated into Cloud Foundry platforms for early adopters, and that's just going to grow. So we're spinning up a big team and planning on hosting Scrum teams in our facilities. So yeah, we're betting big on Pivotal Cloud Foundry and us being a part of that ecosystem for a long time.
Yeah, you guys will certainly get help. We're going to sign up a few more management consulting style companies into Cloud Foundry. So these are the guys that are going to influence the C-suite, right? You kind of come at it from the top. And having a partner from one of these big MC firms go in and say, hey, as you transform, look at CF. And then ideally they should join hands with you guys. Not that that's stopping you from doing it yourself, but having them join hands with you as they draw the vision out and you execute it, and we help out with the transition. I think when I mean we, the collectively, we as the pivotal or the foundation as a combination of both. I think that's going to be a pretty amazing combination in the next year or so.
Yeah, and the fun thing is, our team is super excited to work on Cloud Foundry projects, and one of the things that we've seen, and we just kicked off a new project last week, is that it's so refreshing to have customers who are driving transformation from the top. We've all tried to push that rock uphill where you got a part of the organization that wants to change, but senior leadership isn't desperate enough for change. They're not hungry enough to innovate, and it's just hard. And so it's just fantastic when that change, that impetus for change is coming from the top, then stuff just happens, blockages that can keep you stopped.
It can be just as problematic if the bottom doesn't fit, though. Like, you can drive, if you're just driving from the top, it's just as problematic. Everyone has to meet in the middle and come together, in my opinion. Yeah. So we came off of the OpenStack Summit a little early. We got kind of spun out on the reselling, but what else happened up there in Vancouver?
Containers. That was the talk of the moment. It's like, you should have seen this thing. It's almost surreal. Every talk that had containers and or Docker on the tagline, the line was out the door. There was people in the halls. They couldn't have more people everywhere.
We should totally use containers in Cloud Foundry, guys. Let's make a note to do that.
Yes. Even Docker files.
I think it's also funny. Cool. It's funny to watch that transition because on one of the releases, and it wasn't that long ago, they systematically, surgically removed the Docker support to do the release.
Right. You have to remember that you're talking about the conference and the summit, which is actually where the engineers start designing OpenStack, which runs concurrently, does not have the same level of enthusiasm. So, Andrew, you're right. That I think this is one of the splits that you see. I've seen on every summit lately. Developers and the people in the conference are actually talking about different things, different levels of enthusiasm.
Rob, you lost me when you said OpenStack was engineered.
I didn't say engineered. I said engineers.
All right, we're going to need to muzzle
the people. The people. I'm not going to talk about the architecture. That's a different question. I'm happy to talk shit with you if you want.
Well, this is after dark.
It is. That's true. Maybe I should get another beer.
So, Rob,
on OpenStack, I had a few questions. Right? I think both Cloud Foundry and OpenStack have matured. When I mean matured, in people's minds, what it can and what it cannot do. Right? Forget the technology part, but clients' perception of the tech has matured significantly. Sure. I'm curious in understanding as we look at who's going to own what part of the application. It's pretty clear that the application runtime is going to be Cloud Foundry's for the future, right? The scale out, the runtime with build packs in whatever form or shape, all that is going to be owned by Cloud Foundry. Again, not a bold prediction, but just what I'm seeing with clients. What do we see with services? And that becomes a sticking issue for clients. If I want to spin up a database as a service, now again, I'm not using loaded terms, but I'm a dev. I want to, 2 clicks, give me my database. Is that a function of a platform like Cloud Foundry, or is it a function of something like an OpenStack? And as you look at clients, where do you see the preferences start to emerge? Now, each of them have their own pros and cons. Each of them have their own. It's a loaded, hard question, but I am really curious because I have a ton of clients asking me on what are the best practices, what are clients doing as we spin up services on top of our platform, broadly, which subsumes both CF and anything else.
Oh, sorry, I got interrupted by a ghost. The gist of your question was where are we going to shake out the different layers of the application stack?
Yeah.
My answer is that the idea that we're going to layer cake applications is totally broken. The idea that you're going to have Cloud Foundry and then OpenStack and then physical infrastructure and nice neat layers is totally broken. People are going to use Cloud Foundry because it gives them guidelines on how to deploy applications in a consistent way that scales across teams. It's a very enterprise-friendly way to do this. Whether or not you need OpenStack as the underlay is a different question, and how you package it is different too. Whether it's Docker or Rocket or anything else. So I think that we have people who get very caught up in that because they have lines of business around it, but I think that from a Cloud Foundry user perspective, they don't particularly care if it's OpenStack or something else under the covers.
So I'm going to, because I think you're asking a slightly different question, Arnie, and I'm going to answer it the way I understand it. And
you heard the whole thing. I didn't. So.
That's probably part of it. So when you think about what it means to run a database, and that means the full life cycle, being able to manage a database with upgrades and backups and recovery, it's qualitatively different than what you need to manage a stateless container.
Yes, of course. Of course, that's why the question.
And so when you think about what it takes to do that, and there's the 12-factor app, we'll call it Manifesto, and that's a contract. And that contract gives you the constraints, but it also gives the platform the ability to make promises. I think that there is just like inside of places like Heroku, where they've made decisions about how to deploy those databases, or the things you're seeing come out of Amazon or Google, there's an opportunity to build these as-a-service management of the data services, but they're going to have slightly different contract than you will for stateless applications.
We can be much more specific here, though, Clay. There was an actual conversation that was happening at OpenStack Summit. One of the biggest things at OpenStack Summit was on the Rabbit engineering team, we sent Michael Clishan, who you know from our Skype channel, Andrew.
Absolutely.
And what Michael had written was something that OpenStack badly needed, which was a rolling cluster update plugin so that Rabbit could be continuously available to OpenStack providers. I mean, Ramiro, I don't know if you were in any of the conversations with Michael when he was going through this.
I didn't talk that one actually, but I did talk to him on the halls, and indeed that's a huge advancement.
Yeah, and so I think the truth here is that you can't just ask a platform to constantly rewrite the rules of a data service. You need
Absolutely.
a service that itself is ready to have some sort of automation contract. And it's sort of like they got to meet in the middle, and that's what we've done with Galera on our MySQL service, and which we started to do with Cloud Rabbit. So I think it's a more complex story there.
I don't disagree. It's a more complex story, and I think that there's a tension in this contract platform narrative between what you can do with the platform and what you can do with process and the rest of it to become more operationally mature versus investing in the actual software to make it more operable in the first place.
And that's what we did with Rabbit. And I'm sorry Michael's not on tonight, but he was pretty popular with Bloomberg and with other people there because that was the operational cloud automation issue they had with Rabbit. And to Arnie's point, I don't think either OpenStack or Bosch generically can solve those things until the data service comes along and says, I'm more ready to be automated through my life cycle.
So James, on that point, so I spoke to Michael about that, primarily for Justin at Bloomberg, and Michael and his team, well, not Michael explicitly, but the team that owned that part for Rabbit for Cloud Foundry, did all that hard work for Rabbit, right? The layer on Rabbit to make it, consumable within a platform, specific motion. And what Justin now at Bloomberg is looking at is, and I think that conversation is mostly public, so I'm using those names loosely, but they were like, can we get that within our OpenStack platform? And that's when the lines start to blur. When you have that ability to do that in CF, what's the value in dragging that into OpenStack? And this is a fairly common question that's asked by clients, which is, yeah, let's assume the data services, or whatever services you want to write or consume, have some of those abstractions and those implementations done. In that case, where should it sit? Because you know how the enterprise works. I mean, they have teams of people. It's still, and that's how it's gonna remain for a while. And their question becomes, who owns those parts?
All I'd say, Arnie, is that I think that the lifecycle automation speed of Cloud Foundry, like at CoreLogic, when you get that fast in the app lifecycle, that's actually where you're going to start driving the need for highly automated data services. Because when you've got a slower bespoke setup of VMs, you can tolerate the bespoke setup of data services. So I'd actually argue that I think Cloud Foundry would be the place that this automation lifecycle gets rarefied for data services. And I would prove that our Rabbit service got there to that level of automation before OpenStack got there. Like OpenStack and Paint.
I'm going to take that a step farther, James. I totally agree with you. And I'm going to add that as you quicken the cycles of one thing, then you make the constraint, you make it much more visible, right? And that's a Darwinian factor that forces the rest of that stuff to evolve or else perish.
And that's why Arnie's in pain. He's out in the field, and people are getting their app lifecycle like electricity now, and they're going, great, I want all my databases to be on the same lifecycle. And Arnie's going, how in the world are we going to make that happen for all of them? And I think it's going to be door-to-door fighting for a while to automate certain things, but we're in for that fight.
It's a qualitatively different problem, and it's a more difficult problem. It's part of it.
Hey, so we had someone else join. Do they want to introduce yourself, Michael?
Yeah, I'm Mike Waters. Work for Digital Globe. Been working with Mark Carlson for a while, and trying to get Cloud Foundry into my company. So.
How do you spell your last name? 1 T or 2?
Single T.
Single T. So
Long lost cousins.
Yeah, he's got a CU sticker behind him where I went CU, and his last name is Waters.
You guys are cousins. 1 T removed.
Well, big welcome. Do you want to, Digital Globe's that satellite provider we were talking before. Do you want to tell us what you do at Digital Globe and how you've been thinking about Cloud Foundry?
I started life at Digital Globe as a developer, developed quite a bit of code for them, and moved on into software architecture, and now I'm up into enterprise architecture. So I'm trying to shake things up, take the company in the new directions, and trying to really get a lot of agility. We really you know, I think like a lot of companies kind of suffer from slow cycle times and all that kind of stuff. And I've just seen the value. Mark introduced us to Cloud Foundry, and we've been kicking the tires, and I was a believer from the first day I saw it. And it's just been a little bit of an uphill battle. And I don't know why. I thought people that aren't technologists that don't get this, it's kind of a hard sell, at least to some of them. So some of the things that I've been fighting are things like our vendor lock. People are deathly afraid that we're going to get locked to one particular vendor of Cloud Foundry. And so, yeah, stuff like if you guys can help out getting the suites of tools and suites of tests that will prove API compatibility between all the vendors and stuff, that would make my life so much better right now.
So I want to ask you a question on that front, because this is actually something that comes up constantly. I actually am surprised if a customer doesn't ask about this. And I'll tell you up front, my opinion is that it's an illusion. You can't actually do it. By which I mean you can't avoid lock-in. You can absolutely have sort of testing and compliance suites. And if you look at OpenStack, they, I think, have tried mightily at doing exactly that. But if you look at something like CF, and let's talk about CF in particular, a big part of the reason that there's an ecosystem of vendors of CF is exactly because CF provides this core on which you can build something that's a much richer experience. And as soon as you do that, it doesn't matter if those core APIs are fully compliant. If you use any of those additional features, you're locked, right? And that's unavoidable. And I understand what customers are getting at when they start talking about wanting that sort of avoidance of lock-in. But I think that in practice, you can't really do it unless you stick strictly to the core and then build everything else yourself. So it's an enormous undertaking to do it, and I don't think that for most customers it's worthwhile, even assuming that they have the talent on staff to do it.
I don't disagree with you. And then you don't get the value if if one vendor has something that's going to save me a million man hours, I'd rather use it.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, how do you really talk about your ROI? I mean, right now you're essentially locked into your homegrown thing in a far worse way. This is what I usually compare when people talk about lock-in. I'm like, well, if you're building your own platform, you're locked into a potentially inferior thing for life. But to be very clear though, that core is almost by definition, like if you try stuff on Bluemix and you try stuff on PDubs, it's going to work because all of the vendors use CF release. So somewhat unlike OpenStack, like there's nobody that I know in the Cloud Foundry world except ActiveState that actually forks CF release to do anything different. When we first set up the foundation, we talked about CF release being required to even call it Cloud Foundry. In fact, to me, if you're not using CF release to build whatever you're doing, it's not Cloud Foundry, and I wouldn't consider ActiveState Cloud Foundry for that reason. I think they'd acknowledge the same.
Which is actually an even deeper statement than there are test suites to check compatibility, right? It's not just that it's compatible; it's literally the same bits.
That's where I go to. Is if you have a bit for bit identical system, that is where you get compatibility, as opposed to the app server world in Java where it was, we implement this spec and then wink wink nudge nudge, there's always extra Velcro around the edges of that.
Did that stick with the foundation, or did you suggest it and that's as far as it went?
That when the foundation was originally started, that was the bylaws, and I believe, and I'd let Sam and Chip speak to the latest there. So I don't want to get into a hot potato there, but to me, we took a strong stance and said, if you're not using CF release or these core components, it's not Cloud Foundry. And there's nothing about Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which is by far and away the biggest commercial version, that uses anything special. Like, we just use CF release. Right now, I think if you want to know what's in PCF 1.4, it's CF release, I believe, 205.
205. So when I'm going to drag this back a little bit to the lock-in question. When you look at Pivotal Cloud Foundry, yeah, you have CF release. Yeah, you're able to run these same bits, but you don't have the packaging of the data services. You don't have some of these other dashboards. So once you kind of got your process and your system using those data services, unless you're going to build your own releases for all the data services that you want to provide, then you're kind of there to stay.
The data
I think it's the productivity and the ease of use that's the lock-in, not the uniqueness of the bits.
That's right. So the value and convenience.
But the productivity is also the value, right?
Right.
It's just a weird kind of red herring of a conversation that the industry's having right now.
But you know what? It's worthwhile to look at the psychology behind it, because customers are not saying that for no reason, right? And
yeah, because they've just endured 3 or 4 successive hostile license audits from the big tech vendors.
You have it exactly right. They're fighting the last war. This is a common problem across all industries. They are fighting the last war, right? The last war was, here's WebSphere, you will pay us millions of dollars in perpetuity and get nothing out of it, right? And they're worried that that's going to happen again. And so they're not
the name of every other big software vendor that we've worked and dealt with in the last decade, and
that's right. And so they're looking at
that war is not over yet, right? That they're living that war on the other side of their organization, right?
I feel like we've done a lot of talking, and Michael has the problem. Michael, what do you need from us? This is a talking headville, so we all think we're smart.
Well, the pain, like you've been talking, is like the WebSphere pain, right? You locked in, and it's these massive bills in the mail, and it's untenable.
But even worse than the bills, it's actually that they stop innovating. It's that I think that the problem is the perverse incentive that once you're locked to actually cut R&D and increase their charges. That is, to me, that's the cancer. It's not that it's expensive. It's that it stops moving.
Yeah, it's a dead end, and in fact, the lock-in causes the dead end rather than the other way around.
Yeah, but keep going, Michael. What do you need from us? We're here to help.
I guess just a little bit more is that there's been a few reviews, or I don't know what you call them, talking heads on the internet saying that they believe Cloud Foundry is the next Unix, right? HP is going to go up and create HP Max.
Let's be really specific. Paul Cormier, who is the failed head of product at Red Hat, who has failed to create any new products at Red Hat since he's been there other than RHEL. Like the most failed product executive in the industry. I mean, CloudFormation died. OpenShift died. Anything that Red Hat has done that hasn't been M&A has failed. And Paul's only quip back to us is, well, this is like Unix. And so anyone repeating that talking point it has imbibed from the Red Hat font, if you will. And they use that against me at Sun, because Unix was that was their old enemy. But I mean, that's like a decade-old. I feel like that's a decade-old saw to bring out.
It's kind of also hilarious because if you think about it too hard, you wouldn't have any Linux without Unix. So what are you talking about?
Yeah. Anyway, so Michael, that FUD has gotten into your system, and you're trying to work it out.
The thing that would help. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're the customer.
Right.
I think it's my opinion that the thing that would go the farthest is some set, even a suite of tools, suite of APIs we could run against the various vendors to go, I could pick my stuff up and move. Right. The basic core Cloud Foundry is the same across vendor X, Y, and Z. And using the basic stuff, I can go between any.
But Michael, you recognize that those are actually two totally independent, probably mutually exclusive statements, right? Do you recognize that? Or no? Meaning, if you have actually gotten onto someone who's using CF as the core of an innovative PaaS, and you've bought into that PaaS because of the innovation that they're doing on top of it, whether it's data services or stuff around app lifecycle or visibility into the system. Like, there's all this infrastructure that is built up on top of CF, and that was actually the compelling thing that got you to buy it, right? So you're using all that stuff, and then you say, you know what, I want to be able to pick up and move, except that you've hooked everything into that monitoring, you've hooked everything into those data services, you've hooked everything into that app lifecycle.
So I think there's lock into the platform, and then there's lock into a vendor. Yeah.
I want to make it easier by going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, which is you kind of already had this when the analogy is Unix with POSIX, right? Like you have this way to express a standard, and everyone's adhering to that standard, everyone's compliant with that standard, you know, give or take, and yet you still didn't have that portability. And I would argue that the higher value here is in the utility and the return on investment. And then I want to add a little bit more to the discussion when we were talking about the people that kind of originated this line of thinking. If the critique is that this one thing is in danger of being like Unix and splintering, then how is the solution to go to a single vendor, a single source that is just as locked in as any possible solution might be out in the rest of the world?
I guess my comment back to you guys is that I'm in alignment with you. I understand that. The people writing the checks are not technical. They don't understand this. They think when I'm going to get a vendor, I'm locked forever.
But I think the CF release answer is the answer to what you're asking, and it's very deep. You could actually, I would say, you could argue to those customers that it is an even deeper commitment to portability that you're not going to find really in any other stack, right? It says not just that the APIs are compatible, but it's actually the same bits. So
that's great to know. I had no idea that everyone is picking up CF release like that. That's
almost everyone.
If you look at IBM, I mean, you could get. I mean, I'll go on the record for PCF. We use CF release. I believe IBM. Those are the two vendors that matter in Cloud Foundry, in my humble opinion, is Pivotal and IBM, and they both use CF release. And that's even. I mean, we can also give you a demo app you could show moving between the two of them. but actually just educating them that CF release is the CI bit for bit identical core of both of those systems is, I think, the best way to go. And I'll be in Colorado on Tuesday and Wednesday, and I'd be happy to stop in and talk to anyone about it if you want, or go to a dinner. Just let me know.
Yeah, Mark had mentioned you were going to be in town, and we're trying to finagle something in the back end to see if our higher ups.
No problem. The irony is when I saw my failed industry peer Paul kind of waddle his way into that argument, is that it's very weak thrust because the CF release at the core is actually so powerful. Like, I felt like he might have felt like that'd be good FUD because maybe the way OpenStack fragmented or Linux or Unix fragmented, but CF release is a very powerful thing. To be called Cloud Foundry, you use CF release, end of story. And I'll push on Sam to make sure we carry that message loud and clear.
But I want to come back to something that there's a deeper issue here that I don't think that is broadly understood, and that's that when you have an open core, the point is having a rich, vibrant ecosystem of vendors competing on top of it, often by differentiating on functionality, and if you use that functionality, you're locked to them. That's the explicit point. It's not to lock you in, it's to cultivate that innovation. That competition ultimately benefits all of the customers like you who are using it, but it does imply that there's deviation in what the functionality is above that core. And I think, and this is not to bash OpenStack, I can do that in any other...
Bring it, come on, go, wind up.
I'm not going to bash OpenStack. I'm going to say that this is actually something that OpenStack struggled with from day one, was this tension between maintaining the compatibility of the API and vendors wanting, I think reasonably, to differentiate on functionality. And as soon as you do that, of course, you are incompatible by definition. And I think that part of what they missed there was that Amazon didn't care about maintaining compatibility with them, right? They were running off and introducing all sorts of new services and revving their APIs, right? So that they were innovating. And I think that that core tension actually is the heart of all of what has gone wrong with OpenStack, is not reconciling that core question. And I still think they still haven't. They're still fighting it out. And in CF, there's no ambiguity. This is the open core. This is what will be constant across vendors. Absolutely, vendors will compete in differentiated functionality on top, which can include introducing new APIs that are only available on those vendors, and that's a good thing for customers.
Well, to kind of tag along in your point regarding OpenStack, I think after all these years, they finally reached a milestone with DevCore, the first version of DevCore that is going to be officially, usable in the sense of API compatibility layer. It's going to be a stamp of approval. It's going to be officially called OpenStack. In order to be called OpenStack, you have to pass certain compatibility tests that are based on Tempest. It's well-defined, and so on. So that's the first step. I gave them a little bit of grief in some of the talks on that because from our perspective in Cloud Foundry, which is really we consume APIs, we consume the IIS APIs. So that's not good enough for me, right? We've seen how many times that when we try to deploy Cloud Foundry on different OpenStack environments, we find all sort of weird surprises. The APIs may be exactly the same, but the way they implemented Neutron underneath with whatever plugin is going to alter the MTU, the VM, so that's going to affect the whole performance of the system. Not even getting me started with Cinder and all the things that can happen in between. So there's a lot of complexity that goes beyond just the API compatibility aspect. How it was set up properly or it wasn't. That also matters. So yeah, I mean, they achieved that milestone, but you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a way longer road to follow beyond that.
I don't want to spin on OpenStack too much, but one of my good friends and ex-coworkers from Rackspace, Termy, gave a talk about what we should do with OpenStack. Did anyone happen to see that or make any comments about it?
I did. I don't think it was that useful. Did you see it?
I saw the video. What did you not think was useful?
I don't think it's useful to tell people that the way to fix OpenStack is to throw out OpenStack.
That's not entirely what he said to do.
Okay, anyone who says OpenStack for the rest of this show owes me a quarter.
And
There's going to be an
And
OpenStack card for the rest of the show. I love some
OpenStack after dark.
I mean, let's frame this, right? Termy came from Google, where he worked on building systems that actually worked, and then he worked on the earliest versions of OpenStack, and then now he's sort of working on other things, right?
Totally.
And what was his critique? His critique wasn't that you should throw it all away. His critique was that there's a bunch of compromises that got made along the way that make it really, really hard to do things. And unless you're willing to recognize those and rectify them, then you're going to have a bad time.
I agree with that. I think that one of the things that we're talking to, there's a second point, James, trying to respect your not saying the dreaded words point, but I think that there's another lesson in this, which is that we accepted a whole bunch of projects into the base that diluted what that was, and it created a lot of complexity and confused the ecosystem. And so as much as I've been pushing to try and get a core definition that is interoperable and standard and helps people understand what that is, a lot of the engineers are going out trying to bring more things into the project and potentially make it confusing. And one of the things I would like to see Cloud Foundry avoid is confusing ecosystem in the project, right? If you want a healthy ecosystem, you need to not let things into the core of what Cloud Foundry is about. You have to figure out where those boundaries are, create good APIs, and keep them out. And Termy is saying that, and I agree with that component of his talk.
The stewardship has to be of higher value than inclusivity.
And that is a good insight that is lost. Is lost in the OpenStack community. They are valuing inclusiveness, and it's actually not really real inclusiveness. They're valuing people who come into the community soonest, in my opinion. I mean that's the challenge I see.
Or those who write the largest checks, right?
I'm sorry?
Or those who write the largest checks.
That's a broader statement. I'm
when
not going to go there.
When the foundation was first created and when they were having their elections, that like something on the order of 85% of the board representation is based on who bought the seat, right? So you
know, if I could just maybe steer us in a different direction, that's one of the things.
Please, Mark. Thank you.
Cloud
Foundry. Just kind of segue off on that though. As a new kind of entrant to the ecosystem, so I paid my own way to Summit a year ago, and now we're a sponsor. But we've just, we found that we can have influence and contribute. Open source projects should actually get accepted and be included in betas and things like that are having worked in enterprise software for many years, they're just not possible in other ecosystems or other areas. And so that's been really cool from a service provider, because that allows us to help our clients. We can get plugged into the ecosystem, and that's part of the value we bring to customers of Cloud Foundry and to our customers who are considering Cloud Foundry is that we can get plugged in just like a company many times our size, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we're kind of a passion-driven organization. Like if you look at Cloud Credo and Stark and Wayne, I think they're these are companies that make Cloud Foundry community a special place to be. Because unlike big giant companies, their founders could be doing anything, right? They're smart technical people that could go find any number of jobs, but there's something about the Cloud Foundry design zeitgeist that tickled them, and they wanted to be a part of this. And I think, myself included, that's I think what makes this kind of fun is that these people really get up every day thinking this is the right way forward to organize, technologies.
I think Mark Carlson, I think, tweeted about this yesterday, I think, Mark, where you looked at the stats from the meetups for Cloud Foundry and some of the other corresponding technology out there.
Yep.
And I thought the difference between the two was pretty stark. Just clearly shows the power.
Yeah, it's like 6 or 7x, right? And the gap's getting bigger, by the way, not smaller. Because I've kind of traced that metric over time. Because as Mike alluded to, we've been having some of these challenges internally for some time, and so it's been a helpful metric to track. And it didn't just get to 6x over the nearest competitor recently. It's been that way, and it's getting bigger.
Yeah, I've seen Mark you jumping in and firefighting a lot of what you might call competitor FUD. I appreciate that. We tend not to want to touch that stuff because it just turns into toxic fist fighting when you're actually in the game with a jersey on, like we are. But you're an integrator. You can pick up any technology you want. Like you've got no horse in this race. I mean, you've met us a couple of times, but if you could go be happy and content doing something else, you would, right?
Well, and I think, I mean, to be fair, when there's traction and there's a market, and frankly for our customers, when there's tech that's actually stable and worth betting the business on, then we probably will. But that day is not this day, to quote our Boromir friend, right?
Yeah. So Schaefer, it's 9 o'clock. What else should we cover? Michael, did we help at all?
I think kind of one takeaway I have for you guys is that I don't think I'm in a special business. I think a lot of businesses are going to need to crawl before they walk, and they're probably all going to have the same concerns that my upper management has, vendor lock and all that stuff. So easy ways to lead the horse to water, easy ways to get Cloud Foundry in the house, and then people going, oh my God, I can't believe we can get this much velocity. This is crazy. They'll be all in after just 2 or 3 releases, I think, on Cloud Foundry of seeing how fast they can move. So
I think that's a great message.
Someone in marketing should fix that.
Someone in tech marketing should make sure that message comes across.
Where's Bad Nima? Where's Bad Nima when you need him?
Oh no, sure, marketing at Pivotal.
Andrew Clay, technical marketing Schaefer.
I also think, Michael, it might be good to have Sam Ramji from the foundation talk to your management and talk about CF release as the definition of what it means to be called Cloud Foundry. I think that would be a good thing because he has no commercial interest.
That's great. That'd be awesome.
But I want to say I think that you've made an incredible point that it's really great to hear that is something that we need to improve on because I think a lot of times on AD we're patting ourselves on the back, rightly so.
As fun as it is to take logical fallacies and ram them down people's throats, it's probably not the best way to.
Yeah, but hearing from you that we need to be better at communicating at that, I appreciate that. That's really good to hear.
Good stuff, guys.
So I went on the road last week after basking in the afterglow of the old summit.
I did too. Where'd you go, Shafe?
I went to visit someone who gave a talk at Summit with our CEO at Kroger. So I spent a day with Kroger over there in Cincinnati, and it was good. It was fun. They'd already been doing the Cloud Foundry thing a little bit, and they're just trying to figure out what kind of commitment they want to make to that for their future. And we sent a couple people there, our CEO and myself, and I spent kind of a lunch and learn session talking about DevOps and platforms. It was a little bit of a reprisal, but a little more focused and probably not so zany as my summit talk. And then just some question and answer. Some of the similar things about open ecosystems and Pivotal's place in that, and also thinking about the larger Pivotal portfolio and how all these dots fit together when you're trying to transform a classic enterprise IT organization into a software business, how the labs process and having that as an example to help you build your future is a differentiator. So it was fun. I felt like I feel like everyone's kind of at different places in this journey, but kind of the point you made at the summit in your talk, James, is the way that the web was built is kind of the future for everyone else, and so the more we can take those lessons, hard-fought, hard-won lessons, and package them up for consumption, then the better off the rest of the industry will be.
Yeah, I think I said on stage at Summit, like the time is really now for this cloud-native applications and people to see all the benefits of organizing themselves this way. And I was like a kid in a candy store. I took a trip. I took an all-day customer session and dinner in San Francisco with one of the most valuable banks in the country, and then spent some time down in Los Angeles with a diverse set of companies. And the vibe from the trip was everyone was like, oh my gosh, totally 5 for 5. Like everyone was sort of like high-fiving about how enthusiastic the reception is and how engaged people are with starting on this. But a lot of it was it coming out of Summit, like, you know, JP Morgan being in the Wall Street Journal and saying, hey, we're in on this, we're in to make this a winner. The 11 PCF customers we had speaking that you send to people before you talk to them. And one of the folks said to us is like, we're really excited to see Cloud Foundry becoming so mainstream now, which if you think back when we did the very first Cloud Foundry After Dark Schaefer, you know, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, that it was not mainstream. So it was really interesting to go out and talk to like 4 different industries and see pretty universal interest in moving forward, or, you know, already successful in a pilot. So,
and I'm not going to pretend like we actually know everything about what we're doing over here, but I think that we're running some pretty good experiments. And one of the things that I think was, I don't know if this is a secret or if we should tell this, but the fact that we invited someone to come in our staff meeting, where we're basically, you know, knife fighting with each other about how we should do this stuff, and you know, they shared a good 2-hour session with us as we went through a bunch of stuff. All a bunch of pivotal people, all really smart, all really opinionated, kind of working through some of our dirty laundry with the person in the room.
Well, that was the secret from last week. We talked all about it.
We did. We covered that. That was, I believe, we already revealed that secret.
Well, that was well, you just said the name again, so I was.
Thanks for repeating the secret, Andrew. Like, everyone's super disappointed now. They're like, I already knew that. How is that a secret?
Well, we need another secret then. Oh, here's a. I don't know if it's a secret, but it's foreshadowing for a future After Dark. Because I made a statement in an email thread after having spent the better part of a week or two in some calls with a bunch of Department of Defense people, and kind of being skeptical about our movement and our velocity in that segment.
Basically, you were skeptical that DoD would move fast this year on commercial PCF, you know, engagements.
So I said I would shave my head if we had $1 million PO from the DoD this year.
You shouldn't give the numbers. You shouldn't give the numbers, but there was a bet of a certain magnitude, and Clay would shave it. And it's been we now have to very rapidly, in only the very beginning of Q2 already.
It didn't quite happen yet, but I'll probably shave my head on. We'll do it live.
That's a pretty good
After Dark.
Pretty good secret.
That'll definitely drive attendance.
and not that I need any more attention, but my talk has the most views of any of the videos from Summit. So
help us.
Yeah, technical content doesn't sell, but head shaving seems to.
So we're gonna need a gradual ramp of stunts that we'll do as the salespeople make their targets.
How about if we wax your head after that?
I was going to say, you better grow a lot of hair, Andrew, the way this year's going for us.
No, I mean, once you cross that line, like, you got to do something more audacious.
Should we go, like, I've never seen the movie, but I've seen the previews, 40-Year-Old Virgin with the chest waxing, maybe, for the next big milestone?
Well, that wasn't what I was thinking. But
tattoos.
That escalated quickly.
Are we off air? Or are we still on air?
We're still on air.
We're still on air. All right.
We're in the zany second hour of CFAD.
This guy's insane. I gotta bail.
So is there any other thing we took away from the summit, either the OpenStack or the Cloud Foundry Summit, or something coming up this week that we want to highlight?
There's one thing that I would like to mention that is technically sort of a secret because we haven't put it on the public repos yet. But of course, Dimitri, of course, our King Dimitri, he produced a stem cell for VIO, which is VMware Integrated OpenStack, and he also produced pretty much on the fly. He produced a CPI, a new CPI that can be worked with Bosch inits. I did extensive testing. I spent most of Friday actually testing since I was already back from Summit. And we ended up the day with a VM that can be provisioned. We kind of ran out of ephemeral disk, and the VMware Cloud, reason why we couldn't really finish the Bosch install, but the difficult part is done. So what it means is that now we can technically use BOSH to provision VMs and be as a regular stem cell for VIO, which I think that can also be adapted very quickly to any other OpenStack distro that is using ESX or vSphere as a hypervisor backend. That opens a whole new ballgame to us.
So why don't you expand a little bit more of what that adds? I mean, we could already run it on vSphere, right? So what's the new stuff?
It's actually a good question. I mean, we had this conversation with Wells, which is actually very publicly using vSphere underneath and using Mirantis OpenStack on top. And there's a number of other companies doing that too. It's a philosophical approach, really. Eventually, companies want to use OpenStack as the go-to API for IIS. It's not that you cannot run it today perfectly fine in a different cluster in the same VMware environment. You absolutely can, which has been a real reason to kind of push back on that. It's like, why would you want that? If we have this other mechanism, you can have it. But from the philosophical perspective, there's companies, also some very large service provider in Europe, which is very animate about this. They really want to see this happening because say, hey, we got to be consistent. This is our direction of choice right now, that we chose today to use vSphere as an endpoint, as a hypervisor, but down the road that may not be the choice. So I want to have that freedom. I want Cloud Foundry to use the OpenStack API to provision.
Yeah, that's the same thing that we're doing with CenturyLink Cloud, where I believe we're using the OpenStack as the API and then a slightly different stem cell. And so this is an important trend that you can't tightly couple or hard code the CPI and the stem cell to each other, because you might use one lifecycle API versus the actual hypervisor.
Right.
Might not be the same.
It's an interesting dilemma. So it strikes me as funny to have the CPI. You have CPIs. Those are your API abstraction. Why would somebody care that you're using the OpenStack CPI if you're ultimately backending to a VMware cloud? Wouldn't it be more efficient to just use the VMware CPI?
I think what people see is the ability. I know a big French insurance company did a RFP this way, even though they were all VMware, had an unlimited VMware ELA. And they said, we want to automate to the OpenStack API. Kind of to Michael's concern, they wanted a vendor-neutral API to automate to. And then they would back that with whatever hypervisor provisioning system that they wanted down the line. The idea was that that would be their lock-in air gap.
Yeah, it seems I've seen this argument, and it's a curious one to me because we have all these abstraction layers, right? CPI is an abstraction layer. So it seems like you're actually creating a harder lock-in in a sense, and depending on the abstractions to be abstractions.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to use Cloud Foundry, use the CPIs. Like, let us just go to vSphere. But I think some people want to plug in other systems, I guess. And Rob, you were talking about doing bare metal CPI with what you've been up to. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Heck yeah! No, I was looking at that this weekend. Because I just finished a Docker machine. I don't know if y'all care. I just finished Docker machine integration, and so I decided to turn around and look at the CPI for Cloud Foundry, which is actually pretty darn easy to do. The storage stuff is a little bit trickier, but we just finished the Ceph workload integration, so we have a flexible storage backend as an option now. So I have all the pieces I need to write the CPI. So I'm expecting to work on that this week. And if somebody's interested in collaborating on it or being test client for it, we're happy to start working that process. But I can explain a little bit about what it'll do. So basically, stem cells are a little different from a bare metal perspective because you're not moving an image around. We'd actually build the stem cell. We're working on a way to recreate the stem cell from an install perspective. That's where, just like you were talking about before, different environments have different stem cell approaches, so they don't port easily. But the CPIs are pretty straightforward. So you would have systems in a pool, and when you ask for create a VM, it would pull one out of the pool and give it to you with the stem cell equivalent image. You'd use it when you were done. You'd release it, you'd delete it, and it would go away. It's pretty. I mean, it's really straightforward logic. In some cases, if you pre-warm the cache, you can have these things super fast.
What do you mean by the cache? It means you already have pre-booted machines?
Yeah. So the worst case scenario is that you have machines that have been discovered but never touched. And so you have to boot them, install an OS in them, install the stem cell pieces, and then basically hand it over to Cloud Foundry. And depending on your boot cycles, that can take some time. Usually what we see is that's the first cycle. The second cycle you go through, all you're doing is you're basically telling it to go all the way back through having the stem cell ready and warmed. And then, so it's just waiting, and all you have to do is attach it to Cloud Foundry at that point. It's pretty straightforward. And then there's variations in there. So you could have it ready but not booted. There's all sorts of things. But it's usually not, that's super fast if you think about how long it normally takes to get a server provisioned and added into the cluster. And then we'll turn power on and off is where you get some of the fun wrinkles on this. So when machines aren't in use, you could actually have a big cluster and have machines down. And then we're adding some logic to, and this is where you're talking about pre-warming. So the idea is to add logic to say if I have less than 2 machines in the available pool, bring new ones in, power them up, and get them ready to go. And if I have more than 2, start powering them off.
I think Justin at Bloomberg would be instantly interested in this for sure. So we should connect you and try to see whenever you get something closer, and we should help you get that across the line.
Cool.
A lot of people are interested in bare metal Cloud Foundry, and it's always just been an implementation question. There's nothing architectural about Cloud Foundry that needs virtualization, so that's really fun.
Right. Yeah,
hey, Rob,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask, like, how are you thinking about the scale issue, and what scale do you think it can support? And then, have you given any other thoughts to networking and storage considerations, and how that fits into the CPI?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any significant scale concerns. From you could easily be in the thousands if that was your concern. I mean, there's I wouldn't promise 1,000 today, but there's nothing architecturally that limits you from having a 1,000-node cluster. As a matter of fact, what we're doing when we look at the analytics on the server size is you buy a lot more small servers in this model. So you would want much smaller blades or independent systems than you would buy if you were virtualizing them. It would save you a ton of money. So the networking, we actually do quite a bit of networking, and so a lot of the networking CPI pieces are not hard for us to implement from that perspective. So that network and network isolation should be pretty straightforward. And then the storage, the approach that we were taking for storage is we can set up a Ceph cluster, and then when you ask for a volume set, basically tell Ceph, give me a volume, and then mount it just using, basically just mount a volume. It's pretty straightforward. It's different. I mean, it's fundamentally different than a VM because you're not externally attaching it. Yeah. But you're still the CPIs say, give me a volume and tell me what SDA device it's attached to. And so we would do exactly that. We'd create a volume and then attach it to the machine before we hand it over to Cloud Foundry, and tell Cloud Foundry which device it was attached to. That's exactly the model we use anyway. And same thing is true with networking. Networking's very straightforward from that perspective. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I've looked at several of these APIs, and the CPIs are very usable.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that evolve. I know that's it's the edge cases that kill you on these usually, but I'm interested to see what.
I was worried about it. That's why I spent some time looking at the code. It would help if you have people who are interested. It's going to help me prioritize it from an engineering perspective. Move it off of my desk, which tends to be the experimental desk, onto the other engineers who tend to be the get things done on schedule desk. So yeah, if you have somebody who would consume it sooner I talk to them, the better.
Maybe you should sell those desks as a service.
As soon as they have an API I can use.
No, it's really interesting, Rob. Thanks for doing some work on that. I think we've not wanted to completely open the can of worms to bare metal management because it's just not our specialty. But I always hoped that someone would meet us with a bare metal CPI integration, and this may be the crack of light coming into the cave. So that's really exciting.
It's there. If you think it's worth accelerating, I was already planning to spend this week working on it. So let me see what I can do. I'll keep you guys apprised.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe next Sunday I'll be online talking about it.
Yeah.
Do a demo for you.
I tell you, Cloud Foundry After Dark is always best 1 minute and 15 in, because everyone relaxes. It's like people forget it's being recorded and the good stuff happens.
You got it all out of our system, haven't you?
No, I'm telling you, I always say 1:15 in is when the show starts.
That's the way to do it.
We need to have a two-parter one day and go till 3 a.m.
Ooh.
Cloud Foundry After Dark marathon.
We'll do it around the clock for one day.
To benefit enterprise legacy apps.
I wonder if the Hangout will let you do that, like a 24-hour video. So if anyone else has a point they want to make, they can do that. If not, I think it's forever hold your peace, and we'll call it a night.
I had a topic I'd be interested in drilling into on the next, on a future. I'm not that regular attender, but at the summit, I was really interested to hear about the provider API. And I know the CloudSoft. I've been talking to the CloudSoft people a bit, and I know they're playing about being providers and driving some things through that. So I think there's some really interesting discussion around that. And
are you talking about the service brokers?
I guess that's what it is. It's basically where you can add in a dynamic. I need a database, and it goes and builds you a database and brings it back.
Provider API. Services API. Sorry.
The service broker set up that the CloudSoft, they did the integration with Apache Brooklyn.
Right. That's their thing. Yeah, and I think that architecturally that is where the next battle lines are going to be fought on microservices and dynamic provisioning. I think it's a really interesting topic.
I think there's a bunch of interesting things that emerge there with respect to both specificity and dynamic discovery. So you can do things where you specify full topologies, or you can do things where you have service discovery mechanisms that let you connect things to their dependencies.
And being able to version and identify the dependencies so that you don't get caught on shifting stands is something I'm very interested in talking about. I think architecturally it has to be considered.
No doubt. So it's a holiday. No one has to work tomorrow, hopefully, here in the U.S. at least. Should we call it a night and get back to
work tomorrow? One of the largest banks in Australia is in town, and I'm meeting them over at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in San Francisco to spend 4 hours talking about becoming a platform, not just a bank. Anyone else want to come?
I would be there if I was across the street.
I mean, we could probably still get you a flight, Schaefer. The morning flights get into San Francisco at 10:30.
I could get to San Francisco by about 10:30.
Slackers. I am surrounded by slackers.
No one does any work around here but me. All right. Going once, going twice?
No, Michael, I appreciate you coming on from Digital and sharing in real time what you need. And if there's a chance for us to connect while I'm out in Colorado, I'd really appreciate it. That'd be fun. As an ex-guy who lived in Colorado for 8 years, whose mom lived in Steamboat Springs and went to see you, that'd be fun.
Great. Yeah, I think Mark has your contact stuff. Probably forward it on to me.
I'll forward it along.
Thanks for letting me crash this and talk to you. It's been great.
Anytime. Great. Thanks for coming.
And that's a wrap.